Hello and welcome back, future scientists. I'm Mr. K with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. We're going to continue looking at state test review items. So teacher, if you could, go ahead and pass out these 10 or 15 review questions to everybody. Y'all take some time to work on them. When you're ready for the answers, come back to me, unpause the video, and I'll do them on the board behind me. All right, I'm sure that didn't give y'all any problem, but just in case it did, try your best to follow along and I'll make sure to clear up any of that confusion. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's look at this first one. This says, write the labels and the shapes next to reactants and products in the diagram to show the major reactants and products of photosynthesis in a plant cell. So we've got these four things and we have to figure out where to put them in this whole process of photosynthesis. So for this, let's just think about it. What are some things that plants need? What do plants want to make sure they have enough of in order to survive? Well, we know anyone who takes care of plants is that they need some water, right? H2O. So that's going to be one of the reactants. We got to put in some reactants here, okay? And we need to put this somewhere else. Let's put it up here. Okay, H2O goes up here. All right, what's something else that we really want to make sure that plants have enough of? They need water and they need CO2. So these two things are reactants. They're going into photosynthesis. All right, what are things that come out of photosynthesis? What do we want to make sure? What are plants making? Well, we know that something very important for animals is that they make oxygen. The oxygen we breathe is called O2, and that is made by plants through this whole process. What else do plants make in photosynthesis? Well, the thing that they really want, they're doing it for their own purpose. They're making something they need called glucose. Okay, so this is kind of how we should have answered this. The reactants are water and carbon dioxide. We put that into photosynthesis and we get out oxygen and glucose. Okay, great job. All right, let's move on to the next one. A student is developing a chart to compare aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration in both plants and animals. The incomplete chart is shown. Circle one word or phrase in each set of parentheses to complete the chart. Okay, so here's what we want to do. We got this chart down here with a couple of different answers in parentheses. We're going to circle one that makes this true. All right, so is oxygen required for anaerobic respiration? No, that's why we call it anaerobic, without oxygen, right? Okay, is there glycolysis? In plants, yes, there is glycolysis. Remember, they make that glucose through photosynthesis, and they're going to use it to make some energy. Okay, is glucose completely broken down in anaerobic respiration by animals? No, it is not. It's only partially broken down. And then the last one, what are the end products? Well, in animals, we make something called lactic acid. That's what makes your muscles sore after you work out. Okay, great work. Let's go on to this next one. Okay, here, so this says the model represents photosynthesis. Write the number of each product and reactant in a correct position in the model to best represent the process of photosynthesis. So we just basically are going to write out the equation of photosynthesis here, and let me go ahead and do that for you. So we got 6 CO2, so 6 carbon dioxides, 6 waters, okay? And that's going to yield, using some light energy, we can make glucose, which is C6H12O6, and that's also going to make oxygen. It's going to make 6 diatomic oxygens. So that's kind of what we should have gotten there. This is basically the chemical equation for photosynthesis. It's saying plants take in carbon dioxide and water. They use the energy from the sunlight to make glucose and oxygen, okay? Let's go on to the next one here. Okay, this one says, a student is setting up an investigation of cellular respiration in plant cells. The materials for the investigation are listed. So this is what they used in their experiment. Which set of conditions would most likely result in the plant performing anaerobic respiration? For this, I think we should go with letter B, exposing the plant to total darkness, decreasing the amount of water given to the plant, and decreasing the humidity around the plant, okay? Great job on that one. Let's keep it going. All right, 21 here says, the diagram shows an ATP molecule with 4 bonds labeled. Which statement best explains the structure and function of ATP? For this one, we want to go with B. When bond Z is broken, energy is released for cellular activities. So this is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. The reason it's called triphosphate is that there are 3 phosphates here, okay? And this is basically, think of it as a battery. This is how your cells store energy, like a battery. All the energy, or most of the energy, is in this bond right here, Z. So what we do is we break that bond. When we break that bond, this phosphate, we lose it. Now it's adenosine diphosphate, so ADP, adenosine diphosphate, 2 phosphates. And then we can recycle the ADP and add that phosphate back to it's basically like recharging the battery. So B here, all the energy is in that bond between the 2nd and the 3rd phosphate. Great, let's go on to the next one here. All right, this says, a group of biology students conducted a lab investigating in which they sealed a flask with a balloon. The balloon contained a teaspoon of yeast, a teaspoon of sugar, and 200 milliliters of warm water. The objective was to determine how much carbon dioxide was produced. Which statement best explains why the students used yeast? Well, for this, letter B is going to be our best answer choice. In the absence of oxygen, yeast breaks down into carbon dioxide and ethanol. And this is a process that some people use to ferment, and you can make wine and other alcohols using this yeast, because when it doesn't have oxygen, it breaks down sugar and it makes ethanol and the carbon dioxide there. Great, let's go on to the next one. Okay, the model shows an ADP molecule involved in the body's energy cycle. Which statement best describes the relationship between ADP and ATP? For this one, we want to go with letter C. The addition of a phosphate group to ADP forms ATP and results in a net gain of energy. So we can add another phosphate like this. That's like recharging the battery. This turns ADP into ATP. And we can use that to perform some sort of cellular function, okay? Great job on that. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so for here, this is cellular respiration, and we're going to need to label some of these different boxes here. So let's see if we can come up with something here that we like. All right, cellular respiration is a series of chemical reactions that occur in cells. Record the letter of each of the 6 missing labels in the boxes to best complete the model of cellular respiration. Some labels may be used more than once. Okay, so the first thing that's going on here, out here, let's start from left and we'll work our way into the right. So this whole process, cellular respiration, whether you have oxygen or not, it always starts with glucose. Glucose is really, really important. So that first box over there is going to be glucose. Okay, now what I want us to realize is we're out in the cytoplasm, and that is kind of going to be a hint to us as to what is this next process. We're going to break this glucose down. Well, when we break glucose down, that's called glycolysis, right? Lysis means to split, and so we're splitting glucose. That happens in the cytoplasm. When we complete glycolysis, it makes a little bit of ATP. So that little box down there is going to be ATP. Okay, from there, you can see we have the citric acid cycle is already labeled for us, but through the citric acid cycle, we also make a little bit of ATP. So that one's going to be W as well. The last part of the cellular respiration is the electric transport chain, which is X over there. That's also, notice that this is the mitochondria. Both the electric transport chain and the citric acid cycle both happen in the mitochondria. And then this last one, through the electric transport chain, we make most of our ATP, so another W there. Okay, great work. Let's go on to the next one. All right, a student is comparing aerobic and anaerobic respiration in both animals and plants by constructing equations to represent these 4 general chemical reactions. Record the letters of the missing substances from the list below into the equations where they belong. Substances will be used more than once. Okay, so let's look at this first one. For this, I like C, B, E, and then let's see if we can, if that makes sense. So C is oxygen plus glucose is going to yield water, carbon dioxide, and energy. Okay, so that makes sense. When you get glucose and oxygen together, that is going to make water and carbon dioxide. Up here, this is aerobic respiration in animals. So we breathe in oxygen, we get glucose in our diet, We use that to make a byproduct is water, a byproduct is carbon dioxide, and the main thing we want is that energy. Okay, now let's look at aerobic respiration in plants. Okay, so for this one, it's actually going to be the same thing. C, B, and E. So we don't always think about plants doing aerobic respiration because they do photosynthesis, but photosynthesis is just how they get the glucose. Once they get the glucose, they still have to do this process. So that's why these are the same. Notice that these are the same. The cellular respiration in plants and animals is the same. It's just how do we get the glucose that's different. In animals, we have to eat something to get the glucose. In plants, they make their own glucose. Okay? But once we have the glucose, breaking it down is the same. Okay, let's look at anaerobic respiration in animals. Okay, so for an anaerobic respiration, we have glucose. There's not going to be any oxygen involved here. That's what anaerobic means. But when we do that, we make energy, but we also make a little bit of lactic acid, and that's what makes your muscles feel tired after you've been working out a lot. Okay, how about anaerobic respiration in plants? Here, glucose instead is going to turn into ethanol and carbon dioxide and energy. And again, that's that fermentation process with the yeast. Okay? Great work. I just got a couple more here, so y'all hang in there with me. All right, this says, the model shows the overall process of cellular respiration in a typical animal cell. Circle a process in each set of options to identify the stages of cellular respiration. Okay, so this says step 1 is going to be glycolysis. We always start with glycolysis. That is out in the cytoplasm, and that is our first step. The next thing that happens is going to be the citric acid cycle. Okay, so that's stage 2, and then stage 3 is the electric transport chain. The electric transport chain is how we make most of our ATP. You can see we make 32 ATP through that electric transport chain. Okay, so down here in part B, same thing, circle a reactant or product in each set of options to describe the process as shown by the stages in this model. Okay, so number 1 says stage 1 uses glucose. That should make sense. Glucose is used in glycolysis. Glycolysis means to break down glucose, so you need glucose in order to do that. The next one says stage 2 uses the products of stage 1 to produce ATP and carbon dioxide. Remember, animals, humans, we breathe out carbon dioxide. Why do we do that? It's because it's a byproduct of our cellular respiration. Okay, lastly, stage 3 uses the product of stage 2 and oxygen to produce 32 ATP and water. Okay, great job. Here's our last question for today. A student is developing a model of energy conversion during photosynthesis. Which information must the student include in the model? The best answer here is letter A. Light energy is transferred into glucose molecules as chemical energy. Okay, that's kind of how photosynthesis happens. We use light energy and we turn it into chemical energy by forming these glucose molecules. All right, so thank y'all so much for being here today. Your teacher has some other work for you to do, so make sure to give that your best effort, and I hope everybody has a great day.